Well, it just went through a similar situation with the fiscal cliff, and now Washington has done it again with the so-called sequester. The country is right up against another deadline to avoid a self-inflicted wound to the economy, and with just 1 day left, there is no solution in sight. Tomorrow, deep across-the-board spending cuts kick in if Congress and the White House fail to strike a better budget deal. And there is another deadline looming shortly after that. President Obama met with lawmakers yesterday at a public ceremony, including House Speaker John Boehner, and the look on their faces pretty much sum up the mood of Washington's latest pre-planned crisis. Joining us this morning is Caroline Horn, CBS News Senior Producer for Politics. Caroline, good morning.
Good morning, Anne-Marie.
Well, another day, another conversation about the sequester. Everyone's talking, but no one's doing anything. The president spoke at a dinner, I believe, sponsored by the Business Council, an audience mostly of CEOs. Did we hear anything new from him at all at this dinner?
Mostly it was what he's been saying all along, which is that this sequester needs to be handled in what he's calling a balanced way. It needs to be replaced by both spending cuts and some tax and revenue increases through closing loopholes. He did, however, mention a couple things that we have not heard from the White House as explicitly this week. One was and most of that was on the impact that the sequester cuts would have. He acknowledged that the average American is not necessarily going to notice these cuts the minute that they go into effect on Friday. And that's different than the alarm bells that the White House and many of the federal agencies have been giving out all week. And he said that the impact of the sequester would have a tumble downward effect on the economy.
We learned also that President Obama will actually be meeting with leaders of both parties. Unfortunately, the meeting is planned for Friday, which is after the sequester kicks in. Some Republican legislative aides call this theater because it's really not obviously set up to avoid the sequester. What is the point of the meeting on Friday?
Well, you're right. One Republican aide basically said that this was a farce and that it proved that the administration was not serious about avoiding these cuts. At one point yesterday, there was actually disagreement between Republicans and the White House about when on March 1st those cuts would actually be instituted. This is basically to try to have some sort of a conversation about long-term what's going to be done about these cuts, but I don't think there's a lot of optimism that you're going to see movement immediately just because these guys are getting together at the White House.
Right. The Senate is busying itself, though. The Senate will be voting on 2 bills, but the vote is sort of seen as largely symbolic. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Again, it's a lot more political theater. There are going to be 2 proposals voted on later today, one by the Democrats and one by the Republicans. The Democratic proposal is something that the president supports and, again, has both those tax revenue increases and the spending cuts. That'll be dead on arrival because Republicans won't go for it. On the other side, the Republicans are going to be putting forth a bill that would give the president flexibility to decide what gets cut, and that would be a way of avoiding this sort of meat cleaver across the board, nothing gets saved policy that's going to happen on Friday no matter what. But Democrats and the president aren't going to go for that because then what gets cut is entirely their responsibility and they don't want to have to take the blame.
So we have the sequester knocking on our door at the end of this week, but there's another big date coming up, March 27th, the day when the government will essentially shut down. Can you tell us about that?
Well, it is amazing. We seem to just be going from one mini fiscal crisis to the next, to the next, to the next. And the 27th, you're right, is the next date on the calendar. Basically, by that point, there needs to be a new spending bill for the rest of this fiscal year. And if the president and Congress can't come together on agreement, you might see a shutdown.
Clearly, we'll be talking to you again in the very near future. Caroline Horn, CBS News Senior Producer for Politics. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.